Part II of Cratylus by Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Socrates. Then let us proceed. And where would you have us begin, now that we have got a sort of outline of the inquiry? Are there any names which witness of themselves that they are not given arbitrarily, but have a natural fitness? The names of heroes and of men in general are apt to be deceptive, because they are often called after ancestors with whose names, as we were saying, they may have no business, or they are the expression of a wish, like Eutychides, the son of good fortune, or Sosias, the saviour, or Theophilus, the beloved of God, and others. But I think that we had better leave these, for there will be more chance of finding correctness in the names of immutable essences. There ought to have been more care taken about them when they were named, and perhaps there may have been some more than human power at work occasionally in giving them names. Hermogenes. I think so, Socrates. Socrates. Ought we not to begin with the consideration of the gods, and show that they are rightly named gods? Hermogenes. Yes, that will be well. Socrates. My notion would be something of this sort. I suspect that the sun, moon, earth, stars, and heaven, which are still the gods of many barbarians, were the only gods known to the aboriginal Hellenes. Seeing that they were always moving and running, from their running nature they were called gods, or runners. Theus, Theontus. And when men became acquainted with the other gods, they proceeded to apply the same name to them all. Do you think that likely? Hermogenes. I think it very likely indeed. Socrates. What shall follow the gods? Hermogenes. Must not demons, and heroes, and men come next? Socrates. Demons? And what do you consider to be the meaning of this word? Tell me if my view is right. Hermogenes. Let me hear. Socrates. You know how Hesiod uses the word? Hermogenes. I do not. Socrates. Do you not remember that he speaks of a golden race of men who came first? Hermogenes. Yes, I do. Socrates. He says of them, but now that fate has closed over this race, they are holy demons upon the earth, beneficent, averters of ills, guardians of mortal men. Hermogenes. What is the inference? Socrates. What is the inference? Why, I suppose that he means by the golden men, not men literally made of gold, but good and noble, and I am convinced of this, because he further says that we are the iron race. Hermogenes. Very true. Socrates. And do you not suppose that good men of our own day would by him be said to be of golden race? Hermogenes. Very likely. Socrates. And are not the good wise? Hermogenes. Yes, they are wise. Socrates. And therefore I have the most entire conviction that he called them demons because they were daemones, knowing or wise, and in our older Attic dialect the word itself occurs. Now he and other poets say truly that when a good man dies he has honor and a mighty portion among the dead, and becomes a demon, which is a name given to him signifying wisdom. And I say too that every wise man who happens to be a good man is more than human, daimonion, both in life and death, and is rightly called a demon. Hermogenes. Then I rather think that I am of one mind with you. But what is the meaning of the word hero? Heros. In the old writing, heros. Socrates. I think that there is no difficulty in explaining, for the name is not much altered, and signifies that they were born of love. Hermogenes. What do you mean? Socrates. Do you not know that the heroes are demigods? Hermogenes. What then? Socrates. All of them sprang either from the love of a god for a mortal woman, or of a mortal man for a goddess. Think of the word in the old Attic, and you will see better that the name Heros is only a slight alteration of Eros, from whom the hero sprang. either this is the meaning, or if not this, then they must have been skilful as rhetoricians and dialecticians, and able to put the question erotan, for erein is equivalent to legein. And therefore, as I was saying, in the Attic dialect the heroes turn out to be rhetoricians and questioners. All this is easy enough. The noble breed of heroes are a tribe of sophists and rhetors. But can you tell me why men are called anthropoi? That is more difficult. Her. No, I cannot, and I would not try even if I could, because I think that you are the more likely to succeed. Soc. That is to say, you trust to the inspiration of Euthyphro? Her. Of course. Soc. Your faith is not vain, for at this very moment a new and ingenious thought strikes me, and if I am not careful, before tomorrow's dawn I shall be wiser than I ought to be. Now attend to me, and first remember that we often put in and pull out letters in words, and give names as we please and change the accents. Take for example the word di philos. In order to convert this from a sentence into a noun, we omit one of the iotas and sound the middle syllable grave instead of acute, as, on the other hand, letters are sometimes inserted in words instead of being omitted, and the acute takes the place of the grave. Her. That is true. Soc. The name anthropos, which was once a sentence and is now a noun, appears to be a case just of this sort, for one letter, which is the alpha, has been omitted, and the acute on the last syllable has been changed to a grave. Her. What do you mean? Soc. I mean to say that the word man implies that other animals never examine or consider or look up at what they see, but that man not only sees (opape), but considers and looks up at that which he sees, and hence he alone of all animals is rightly called anthropos, meaning anathron ha opape. Her. May I ask you to examine another word about which I am curious? Soc. Certainly. Her. I will take that which appears to me to follow next in order. You know the distinction of soul and body? Soc. Of course. Her. Let us endeavor to analyze them like the previous words. Soc. You want me first of all to examine the natural fitness of the word psyche, soul, and then of the word sama, body? Her. Yes. Soc. If I am to say what occurs to me at the moment, I should imagine that those who first used the name psyche meant to express that the soul, when in the body, is the source of life, and gives the power of breath and revival (anapsukon), and when this reviving power fails, then the body perishes and dies, and this, if I am not mistaken, they called psyche. But please stay a moment. I fancy that I can discover something which will be more acceptable to the disciples of Euthyphro, for I am afraid that they will scorn this explanation. What do you say to another? Her. Let me hear. Soc. What is that which holds and carries and gives life and motion to the entire nature of the body? What else but the soul? Her. Just that. Soc. And do you not believe with Anaxagoras that mind or soul is the ordering and containing principle of all things? Her. Yes, I do. Soc. Then you may well call that power pwyseke, which carries and holds nature, he pwysyn, oke, kai, eke, and this may be refined away into psyche. Her. Certainly, and this derivation is, I think, more scientific than the other. Soc. It is so, but I cannot help laughing if I am to suppose that this was the true meaning of the name. Her. But what shall we say of the next word? Soc. You mean sama, the body? Her. Yes. Soc. That may be variously interpreted, and yet more variously if a little permutation is allowed. For some say that the body is the grave, sema, of the soul, which may be thought to be buried in our present life; or again the index of the soul, because the soul gives indications to (semine), the body. Probably the Orphic poets were the inventors of the name, and they were under the impression that the soul is suffering the punishment of sin, and that the body is an enclosure or prison in which the soul is incarcerated, kept safe (sama, sazetai), as the name sama implies, until the penalty is paid. According to this view, not even a letter of the word need be changed. Her. I think, Socrates, that we have said enough of this class of words. But have we any more explanations of the names of the gods, like that which you were giving of Zeus? I should like to know whether any similar principle of correctness is to be applied to them. Soc. Yes, indeed, Hermogenes; and there is one excellent principle, which, as men of sense, we must acknowledge, that of the gods we know nothing, either of their natures, or of the names which they give themselves; but we are sure that the names by which they call themselves, whatever they may be, are true. And this is the best of all principles; and the next best is to say, as in prayers, that we will call them by any sort or kind of names or patronymics which they like, because we do not know of any other. That also, I think, is a very good custom, and one which I should much wish to observe. Let us then, if you please, in the first place, announce to them that we are not inquiring about them. We do not presume that we are able to do so, but we are inquiring about the meaning of men in giving them these names. In this there can be small blame. Her. I think, Socrates, that you are quite right, and I would like to do as you say. Soc. Shall we begin then with Hestia, according to custom? Her. Yes, that will be very proper. Soc. What may we suppose him to have meant who gave the name Hestia? Her. That is another, and certainly a most difficult question. Soc. My dear Hermogenes, the first imposers of names must surely have been considerable persons. They were philosophers, and had a good deal to say. Her. Well, and what of them? Soc. They are the men to whom I should attribute the imposition of names. Even in foreign names, if you analyze them, a meaning is still discernible. For example, that which we term ousia is by some called essia, and by others again ossia. Now that the essence of things should be called Hestia, which is akin to the first of these, essia equals Hestia, is rational enough. And there is reason in the Athenians calling that Hestia which participates in ousia. For in ancient times we too seem to have said essia for ousia, and this you may note to have been the idea of those who appointed that sacrifices should be first offered to Hestia, which was natural enough if they meant that Hestia was the essence of things. Those again who read Ossia seem to have inclined to the opinion of Heracleitus, that all things flow and nothing stands. With them the pushing principle, Othun, is the cause and ruling power of all things, and is therefore rightly called Ossia. Enough of this, which is all that we who know nothing can affirm. Next in order after Hestia we ought to consider Rhea and Cronus, although the name of Cronus has been already discussed. But I dare say that I am talking great nonsense. Her. Why, Socrates? Soc. My good friend, I have discovered a hive of wisdom. Her. Of what nature? Soc. Well, rather ridiculous, and yet plausible. Her. How plausible? Soc. I fancy to myself Heracleitus repeating wise traditions of antiquity as old as the days of Cronus and Rhea, and of which Homer also spoke. Her. How do you mean? Soc. Heracleitus is supposed to say that all things are in motion and nothing at rest. He compares them to the stream of a river, and says that you cannot go into the same water twice. Her. That is true. Socrates. Well then, how can we avoid inferring that he who gave the names of Cronus and Rhea to the ancestors of the gods agreed pretty much in the doctrine of Heracleitus? Is the giving of the names of streams to both of them purely accidental? Compare the line in which Homer, and as I believe Hesiod, also tells of Ocean, the origin of gods, and mother Tethys. And again Orpheus says that the fair river of Ocean was the first to marry, and he espoused his sister Tethys, who was his mother's daughter. You see that this is a remarkable coincidence, and all in the direction of Heracleitus. Hermogenes. I think that there is something in what you say, Socrates, but I do not understand the meaning of the name Tethys. Socrates. Well, that is almost self-explained, being only the name of a spring a little disguised. For that which is strained and filtered, diatomenon, ethumenon, may be likened to a spring, and the name Tethys is made up of these two words. Hermogenes. The idea is ingenious, Socrates. Socrates. To be sure. But what comes next? Of Zeus we have spoken. Hermogenes. Yes. Socrates. Then let us next take his two brothers, Poseidon and Pluto, whether the latter is called by that or by his other name. Hermogenes. By all means. Socrates. Poseidon is Posidasmos, the chain of the feet. The original inventor of the name had been stopped by the watery element in his walks, and not allowed to go on, and therefore he called the ruler of this element Poseidon. The epsilon was probably inserted as an ornament. Yet perhaps not so, but the name may have been originally written with a double lambda, and not with an sigma, meaning that the god knew many things. Pola eidos. And perhaps also he, being the shaker of the earth, has been named from shaking, sein, and then pi and delta have been added. Pluto gives wealth, Plutos, and his name means the giver of wealth, which comes out of the earth beneath. People in general appear to imagine that the term Hades is connected with the invisible, Aedes, and so they are led by their fears to call the god Pluto instead. Hermogenes. And what is the true derivation? Socrates. In spite of the mistakes which are made about the power of this deity, and the foolish fears which people have of him, such as the fear of always being with him after death, and of the soul denuded of the body going to him, my belief is that all is quite consistent, and that the office and name of the god really correspond. Hermogenes. Why, how is that? Socrates. I will tell you my own opinion, but first I should like to ask you which chain does any animal feel to be the stronger, and which confines him more to the same spot, desire or necessity? Hermogenes. Desire, Socrates, is stronger far. Socrates. And do you not think that many a one would escape from Hades, if he did not bind those who depart to him by the strongest of chains? Hermogenes. Assuredly they would. Socrates. And if by the greatest of chains, then by some desire, as I should certainly infer, and not by necessity? Hermogenes. Clearly. Socrates. And there are many desires? Hermogenes. Yes. Socrates. And therefore by the greatest desire, if the chain is to be the greatest? Hermogenes. Yes. Socrates. And is any desire stronger than the thought that you will be made better by associating with another? Hermogenes. Certainly not. Socrates. And is not that the reason, Hermogenes, why no one who has been to him is willing to come back to us? Even the sirens, like all the rest of the world, have been laid under his spells. Such a charm, as I imagine, is the god able to infuse into his words. And according to this view, he is the perfect and accomplished sophist, and the great benefactor of the inhabitants of the other world. And even to us who are upon earth he sends from below exceeding blessings. For he has much more than he wants down there, wherefore he is called Pluto. or the rich. But he will have nothing to do with men while they are in the body; only when the soul is liberated from the desires and evils of the body has he communion with them. Is there not a great deal of philosophy and reflection in this? For in their liberated state he can bind them with the desire of virtue; but while they are flustered and maddened by the body, not even Father Cronus himself would suffice to keep them with him in his own far famed chains. Her. There is a deal of truth in what you say. Soc. Yes, Hermogenes, and the legislator called him Hades, not from the unseen (Ades), far otherwise, but from his knowledge (Eidonai) of all noble things. Her. Very good; and what do we say of Demeter, and Hera, and Apollo, and Athene, and Hephaestus, and Ares, and the other deities? Soc. Demeter is so called because she gives food like a mother. He didusa meter. Hera is the lovely one (Erate), for Zeus, according to tradition, loved and married her. Possibly also the name may have been given when the legislator was thinking of the heavens, and may be only a disguise of the air (aer), putting the end in the place of the beginning. You will recognize the truth of this if you repeat the letters of Hera several times over. People dread the name of Peripata, as they dread the name of Apollo, and with as little reason. The fear, if I am not mistaken, only arises from their ignorance of the nature of names. But they go changing the name into Persephone, and they are terrified at this; whereas the new name means only that the goddess is wise (Sope); for seeing that all things in the world are in motion (Περαμένων), that principle which embraces and touches and is able to follow them is wisdom; and therefore the goddess may be truly called Peripape (Peripapa), or some name like it, because she touches that which is in motion (to περαμένου επαπτωμεναι), herein showing her wisdom. And Hades, who is wise, consorts with her, because she is wise. They alter her name into Peripata nowadays, because the present generation care for euphony more than truth. There is the other name, Apollo, which, as I was saying, is generally supposed to have some terrible signification. Have you remarked this fact? Her. To be sure I have, and what you say is true. Soc. But the name, in my opinion, is really most expressive of the power of the god. Her. How so? Soc. I will endeavor to explain; for I do not believe that any single name could have been better adapted to express the attributes of the god, embracing and in a manner signifying all four of them: music, and prophecy, and medicine, and archery. Her. That must be a strange name, and I should like to hear the explanation. Soc. Say rather an harmonious name, as beseems the god of harmony. In the first place, the purgations and purifications which doctors and diviners use, and their fumigations with drugs magical or medicinal, as well as their washings and lustral sprinklings, have all one and the same object, which is to make a man pure both in body and soul. Her. Very true. Soc. And is not Apollo the purifier, and the washer, and the absolver from all impurities? Her. Very true. Soc. Then, in reference to his ablutions and absolutions, as being the physician who orders them, he may be rightly called Apolluon (purifier); or in respect of his powers of divination, and his truth and sincerity, which is the same as truth, he may be most fitly called Haplos (from haplus, sincere), as in the Thessalian dialect; for all the Thessalians call him Haplos. Also he is aibalon (always shooting), because he is a master archer who never misses. Or again the name may refer to his musical attributes, and then, as in akoluthos and akoitis, and in many other words, the a is supposed to mean together, so the meaning of the name Apollo will be moving together, whether in the poles of heaven, as they are called, or in the harmony of song, which is termed concord, because he moves all together by an harmonious power, as astronomers and musicians ingeniously declare. And he is the God who presides over harmony and makes all things move together, both among gods and among men. And as in the words akoluthos and akoitis the alpha is substituted for an omicron, so the name Apollon is equivalent to homopollon, only the second lambda is added in order to avoid the ill-omened sound of destruction, Apollon. Now, the suspicion of this destructive power still haunts the minds of some who do not consider the true value of the name, which, as I was saying just now, has reference to all the powers of the God, who is the single one, the ever darting, the purifier, the mover together. Haplus, Aibolon, Apolluon, Demopollon. The name of the Muses and of music would seem to be derived from their making philosophical enquiries, Mosthai, and Leto is called by this name because she is such a gentle goddess, and so willing, Ethelimon, to grant our requests. Or her name may be Letho, as she is often called by strangers. They seem to imply by it her amiability and her smooth and easy-going way of behaving. Artemis is named from her healthy, Artemis, well-ordered nature, and because of her love of virginity, perhaps because she is a proficient in virtue, arete, and perhaps also as hating intercourse of the sexes, ton eraton misesasa. He who gave the goddess her name may have had any or all of these reasons. Hermogenes. What is the meaning of Dionysus and Aphrodite? Socrates, son of Hipponicus, you ask a solemn question. There is a serious and also a facetious explanation of both these names. The serious explanation is not to be had from me, but there is no objection to your hearing the facetious one, for the gods too love a joke. Dionysus is simply Didus oinon, giver of wine, Didoinusos, as he might be called in fun, and oinos is properly oinus, because wine makes those who drink think, oiasthai, that they have a mind, nun, when they have none. The derivation of Aphrodite, born of the foam, aphros, may be fairly accepted on the authority of Hesiod. Hermogenes. Still there remains Athene, whom you, Socrates, as an Athenian, will surely not forget. There are also Hephaestus and Ares. Socrates. I am not likely to forget them. Hermogenes. No, indeed. Socrates. There is no difficulty in explaining the other appellation of Athene. Hermogenes. What other appellation? Socrates. We call her Pallas. Hermogenes. To be sure. Socrates. And we cannot be wrong in supposing that this is derived from armed dances, for the elevation of oneself or anything else above the earth, or by the use of the hands, we call shaking, palein, or dancing. Hermogenes. That is quite true. Socrates. Then that is the explanation of the name Pallas? Hermogenes. Yes, but what do you say of the other name? Socrates. Athene? Hermogenes. Yes. Socrates. That is a graver matter, and there, my friend, the modern interpreters of Homer may, I think, assist in explaining the view of the ancients. For most of these in their explanations of the poet assert that he meant by Athene mind, nous, and intelligence, dianoia, and the maker of names appears to have had a singular notion about her, and indeed calls her by a still higher title, divine intelligence, theou noesis, as though he would say, this is she who has the mind of God, theanoa, using alpha as a dialectical variety for eta, and taking away iota and sigma. Perhaps, however, the name theanoe may mean she who knows divine things, theia nousa, better than others. Nor shall we be far wrong in supposing that the author of it wished to identify this goddess with moral intelligence, en ethe noesin, and therefore gave her the name Aithonoe, which, however, either he or his successors have altered into what they thought a nicer form, and call her Athene. Hermogenes. But what do you say of Hephaestus? Soc. Speak you of the princely lord of light? Theos histora? Hermogenes. Surely. Soc. Hephaestos is Phaistos, and has added the eta by attraction. That is obvious to anybody. Hermogenes. That is very probable, until some more probable notion gets into your head. Soc. To prevent which you had better ask what is the derivation of Ares. Hermogenes. What is Ares? Soc. Ares may be called, if you will, from his manhood, Aren, and manliness, or, if you please, from his hard and unchangeable nature, which is the meaning of Aratos. The latter is a derivation in every way appropriate to the god of war. Hermogenes. Very true. Soc. And now, by the gods, let us have no more of the gods, for I am afraid of them. Ask about anything but them, and thou shalt see how the steeds of Euthyphro can prance. Hermogenes. Only one more god. I should like to know about Hermes, of whom I am said not to be a true son. Let us make him out, and then I shall know whether there is any meaning in what Cratylus says. Soc. I should imagine that the name Hermes has to do with speech, and signifies that he is the interpreter (Hermeneus), or messenger, or thief, or liar, or bargainer. All that sort of thing has a great deal to do with language. As I was telling you, the word erein is expressive of the use of speech, and there is an often recurring Homeric word, emeseto, which means he contrived. Out of these two words, erein and mesasthai, the legislator formed the name of the god who invented language and speech, and we may imagine him dictating to us the use of this name. O my friends, says he to us, seeing that he is the contriver of tales or speeches, you may rightly call him Eremes, and this has been improved by us, as we think, into Hermes. Iris also appears to have been called from the verb to tell, erein, because she was a messenger. Hermogenes. Then I am very sure that Cratylus was quite right in saying that I was no true son of Hermes. Hermogenes. For I am not a good hand at speeches. Soc. There is also reason, my friend, in Pan being the double-formed son of Hermes. Hermogenes. How do you make that out? Soc. As you are aware, speech signifies all things, Pan, and is always making them go round in a circle, and has two forms, true and false. Hermogenes. Certainly. Soc. Is not the truth that is in him the smooth or sacred form which dwells above among the gods, whereas falsehood dwells among men below, and is rough like the goat of tragedy? For tales and falsehoods have generally to do with the tragic or goatish life, and tragedy is the place of them. Hermogenes. Very true. Soc. Then surely Pan, who is the declarer of all things, Pan, and the perpetual mover, ai polon, of all things, is rightly called Aippolos, goatherd, he being the two-formed son of Hermes, smooth in his upper part, and rough and goat-like in his lower regions. And as the son of Hermes, he is speech, or the brother of speech, and that brother should be like brother is no marvel. But, as I was saying, my dear Hermogenes, let us get away from the gods. Hermogenes. From these sort of gods, by all means, Socrates. End of Part II of Cratylus. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.